But let's see now how they are planning to use our savings. They're planning to make savings investment union, and how they're planning to use it. Please go in details.
Right now, I will try to keep it short. In my Substack, I have more detailed points of particular policies that are possible to implement this. And there's a spectrum that starts from being mildly interventionist to being extremely interventionist and essentially confiscating people's bank deposits. Unfortunately, the entire spectrum is a possibility. And I give the many examples in between of various combinations, but let's just look at the most extreme case, which is confiscation of our deposits. That is mentioned explicitly in this coalition agreement that Friedrich Merz and his CDU and the leftist SPD party in Germany have hammered out and have agreed on already. They have several passages in there where they say that we can make use of people's assets. And now they're doing this under the cover of, well, some assets that are probably not rightful assets. And they're doing something very extraordinary. In a democracy, in a country that has democratic principles and the rule of law is dominant, you usually have the principle of private property. And private property is considered fairly unalienable. Now, if the government wants to take your property, then the government has to prove that you did something wrong, particularly in order to get that property. There's something illegal, something criminal happening. And the burden of proof is on the government, the prosecutor, the state apparatus. They have to come up with evidence and they have to show it to courts and convince judges, and then they may be able to take this property from you. So it is possible, even in a democracy, but it's a high hurdle. What they've done now in this coalition agreement is they've reversed the burden of proof. That is completely shocking. They're saying, no, the government doesn't have to prove that you did something wrong or that you did something criminal. No. Every citizen, when asked by the government, oh, how about your assets? How about your savings? How about your house? How about all your assets? You then have to come up with all the evidence of exactly where and when and how you bought it, for how much, from whom, and deliver the documents, the papers, the receipts. Maybe it's 10 years ago, maybe it's 50 years ago. They don't care. If you can't deliver the receipts, that is enough reason, according to this passage in the coalition agreement, for the government then to have the right to take your assets, because the moment you can't prove exactly how you got it, it's considered already suspect or even criminal assets that are not yours. If you can't prove how you got it, it won't be yours. Now, some people say, well, that's not a problem. I can prove my assets. And, for many people, particularly in recent years, where a lot of things have already been digitalized and there is an online trail and there's good receipts, and most people have receipts for the last 5, 6, 7 years, maybe, it's not a problem. But many assets, of course, held by the elderly. And many of these elderly generation in Europe have been very parsimonious. They've saved a lot. And often they just saved when they were working, and then when they were in retirement, they still didn't spend much. They saved a lot. And so it accumulates over the decades. They've never done anything wrong, but they also by now will not have any receipts of the money that they've been saving already for 50 years. And if you don't have the receipts, and maybe you're given a time limit, within 30 days you must produce evidence, otherwise it's not your asset, it's not your money anymore. That is completely outrageous. So this should be forbidden. To reverse this causation, this burden of proof. It should always be those who claim there's something wrong with the ownership of the assets, they should provide the evidence. But citizens that don't have a criminal record, that have never done anything wrong, suddenly to be treated like criminals. That, of course, is exactly what totalitarian regimes do. They've started to introduce this very cleverly in various areas under the pretense of fighting terrorism and fighting money laundering and criminal things, for example, at airports. Why, as a law-abiding, honest citizens, am I being treated like a criminal in some airport security, particularly in some countries? The security staff are not very friendly, and they really make you feel like you're some kind of criminal. The burden of proof should be on them to show there's anything wrong, and otherwise, so far, we've had the presumption of innocence. And if that is taken away, then we don't have law and order and freedom and democracy anymore.
Yeah, that's in the case they want to confiscate your assets. But let's see what other tools they have to use it. For example, crisis. We saw some crisis. For sure, we know there was also UN agreement that we signed last September, where we're talking about new crisis. And also there is a now WHO agreement also talking about crisis, and everybody now is threatening us from Russia. Russia will attack Europe. That means lots of crises are coming. In this kind of crisis, they have additional way to confiscate or to use our money or savings for their purposes. Am I right?
Absolutely. And actually, in more countries than people realize, for quite a long time period, we've had a state of emergency. France has had extended periods of states of emergency, and then, of course, the government has more powers to intervene in a way that normally it's not allowed to intervene. So that, of course, was again pushed very hard since 2020 under some kind of worst pandemic in human history, allegedly. I'm glad that we're all still here. And under this pretense of emergency powers, individual freedoms were taken away. So that also is possible